Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. We are having a look at the naval forces which are on the Hornet Sting dev server, and in this video we are going to go through all of the new ones, but also at the same time tell you about something new that is happening at the start of the coastal tech trees. So basically what they're going to do is they're replacing a lot of the reserve vehicles that are at the start of coastal. So the USSR G5, the German LS3, the British MTB-1, the Japanese Type T14, and the French VTB-8 have been replaced by new reserve vehicles. You can actually see here that the MBT-11 is now by itself, and the MTB-35 is sat at a reserve. Now, that's the same over here with the Russians, so you have the D3 instead of the G5. Then for Japan, the Type T14 instead of this one, so you get the Mod 2, which has the better gun. And all of this is to incentivize people to play coastal and not just get annihilated when you are using terrible guns with the vehicles, because most of them either have 7.7s or 7.5s, which are useless. Now, one of the things that they are doing as well, if you have a look at the coastal fleet here are 3 vehicles that are being removed from the French coastal start, and instead you start with the VB12, and then they're adding the VB18 too. What they're doing is once you complete rank 1, when you fully research rank 1, these vehicles will become available to you. So they're not removing them from the game, they are just making it so you can't play these first, so therefore you have a much better experience playing something else instead of them. And therefore, they're not being removed for anybody. You'll still be able to keep them. You'll still be able to go through them all. It's just something that they're doing to try and incentivize people to start, playing coastal. So let's have a look at the new vehicles that are coming in for naval. You have a nice, well, this time you actually have a lot more coastal stuff than you do blue water, which is usually not the case, but it's a nice change, at least in my opinion. The first vehicle is the SM4. This is a coastal vehicle for the Russians. It's a motor torpedo boat, and to be honest, it looks like a fat G5. It has access to 3 12.7mm Dishkas and also the 5338 torpedoes on the side. These 5338 torpedoes have a good travel distance. They're not very fast, but at least you'll be able to get them off out of the targets. You can find it here. So this is actually the first vehicle you'll research after getting the D3, which is the new reserve vehicle. It isn't anything special. It's not crazy fast, doesn't have any armor, but does have access to quite a nice armament, and also should be pretty fun just to kind of go around and have a good time with. The next vehicle we're going to be having a look at is for Britain, and it is their new starter vehicle too. This is the MTB-35. It has 2 12.7mm Vickers Mark 5s. It also has access to 2 Mark 8 torpedoes that you can see over here too. So has a little bit of everything. The only problem I have with these 12.7s is they probably don't have great angles of fire, so it's going to be a little bit harder to be able to actually hit targets with them unless you're like angled over here. So you've got to be careful of your bridge getting in the way compared to other vehicles. The 12.7s have some pretty decent rounds, a lot better than the 7.7s, and then also you do get the Mark 8 torpedoes, which don't have a great travel distance but do have a good speed, so perfect for going after other coastal vessels. You also do have artillery support, so it gives you a good start, and you can find it right here in the tech tree on the left-hand side. This will be the first vehicle that you get access to. The other vehicle that is coming in for naval for Britain is the HMS Warspite. The Warspite is one of, if not the most decorated ships of the Royal Navy. It served in mainly World War II, but also in and around the First World War, and it has access to the 15-inch cannons that you can see right here, the 4 dual-mounted sets. So you have 2 on the front and then 2 on the back. You also have a bunch of 6-inch single-mounted guns, 4 dual-mounted 4-inch guns, and then also octo pom-poms, or octo 40mm, which is a set of guns that I really like. You can actually see them right here as anti-air support. It also does have dotted around it 15 single 20mm guns too, which generally will give it a little bit more firepower, but not do too much in overall. When it comes to the armor of this thing, it has a belt of 330, but it's a very thin belt. You also have access to 152mm above that, and then 38 above that. On the guns itself, you have 330 on the front, and then only 279 on the sides. And also there is no real armor around the bridge, which does seem to be probably a bug. I'd be very surprised if this vehicle didn't have any armor around that. There's also no armor around the ammo elevators either, so I would say that this armor is probably not finished, but it will get there. You do have huge ammo racks for the 15-inch guns. You also have a set of engines in the center, which all lead into one big smoke funnel, plus some transmissions to move stuff around too, and a fun little hydroplane in the center of it. They're actually adding a spawn point for hydroplanes now, which is quite fun. Hopefully in the future, they can actually add more stuff to it, because I think in general, that's actually really cool. And then also you have all of the fire directors and everything. They are changing how the aiming is working in Naval. We'll talk about it in a different video, but it just kind of makes me sad, if I'm honest. I wish they weren't doing what they're doing. But the other thing is they are adding a new 15-inch shell. So first of all, you have the SAPC-BC. This is the 4CRH CPC, pens 226 at most, and has quite a lot of TNT inside of it, 61.67 kilos. You also have the Mark 7A APC shell. This one has 20.6 kilos of TNT equivalent and pens 650 at most. And then this one right here, which is the Mark 17? Yeah, 17B APC. The difference between these, you can see the muzzle velocity is basically the same, but the penetration is slightly higher on this one, and they have the same TNT equivalent. So the difference is very negligible. My guess is we might see some more differences in the future. But one of the big things that was coming with the Warspite was a new round, and this kind of showcases that. You also have some for the other guns, HE and CPBC, which have turned up too, and all of the other modifications are pretty standard on the vehicle. You will find the Warspite in the Blue Water tech tree, and it will be after the Marlborough. So on the left-hand side, joining the Hood, and also the Rodney and the Barham, at being the 7.0s for Britain, alongside, of course, the Renown, which is here too. For Japan, you have two machines. We'll start off with the Type T14 Mod 2. So what is the difference between this one and the T14, you may ask? Well, it's the gun. Basically, the T14 only had a 13.2mm Type 93, so they've decided that the new reserve should have a 25mm. Pretty much everything else is exactly the same. It just has a different gun on the top of it, so it does more damage. And I think this is good, since a lot of reserve vehicles just didn't do anything to their other vehicles. So now this one will be a bit better. The other vehicle is the Matsu. Now, this is a wonky one. It's from 1944, so it's a late World War II destroyer, and it basically just got absolutely clapped in the later period of the war. It's part of the Matsu class. It's going to be at rank 1 of the Blue Water Fleet. And you can see here, it does actually have a different design to it compared to a lot of the other destroyers in the Japanese tech tree. So first of all, it has a 5-inch gun on the front of it, a single mounted one that you can see here. And then it has a kind of dual mount 5-inch set of guns on the back. So that at least is kind of weird and wonky. It doesn't have any guns in the center, apart from some 25mm, which were designed for more kind of AA defense. And then also it has some torpedo tubes in the center. So this vehicle has the Type 93 Model 1s, which are the torpedoes that have a really good range to them, and also at the same time do a ton of damage. But it doesn't really have that impressive of an armament. You know, these 5 inches, they have 12 rounds per minute fire rate. It doesn't have a first stage, which is good. So you have a standard fire rate, but it only has 3 of the guns, and you're going to be pretty reliant on the torpedoes doing something, which of these low BRs they can do. because once they get to the enemy, they are going to be pretty fast. They are going to be going in pretty strong, which generally I think is actually quite good for these types of vehicles. So this one is just a different, quirky vehicle at the lower tiers, which I think is actually pretty cool for Japan, since a lot of them kind of feel the same in terms of how you play them. The next vehicle we're having a look at is for Italy, and it is the Grecale. I don't know how to say it, but the Grecale is another vehicle which is in the Blue Water Fleet for Italy. It's a rank 1 and it is a destroyer. And this one is actually a post-World War II machine. So it doesn't have, great stats for it, but it is technically a Cold War destroyer. It has access to 2 dual mounts, so the 120mm. These are not guns that I really enjoy. You can see they don't have a great fire rate compared to the competition. It does also have access to some 37mm that are dotted around the place, and to 20mm that are there as well on the vehicle. So once again, not a ton of stuff. It does technically have some torpedoes in the center, so you can bring those along. You have the S-1270s. They're not very good, so there's not really a lot to talk about, and you have a few depth charges, but really not a lot. So this vehicle is continuing the great kind of, I suppose, story of Italian blue water just being feeble and weak compared to everything else that is around. So very unfortunate for the Italians. The French are getting a bunch of changes, which is actually really cool. So first of all, what they're getting access to is some new reserve coastal vehicles. As we talked about before, the VTB 8, 11, and 14 are all going to be folded together, and you will get access to them once you fully research rank 1. All of those vehicles were terrible. They were really bad to play, really rough, and I'm glad that they've done this. So now the new starter vehicle is the VBT 12. This one, instead of having to deal with the 7.5mm guns, or the 7.7mm guns, sorry, you actually get access to the 13.2 Hotchkisses, which is really nice. And they're also mounted on the top, so therefore they should have good clearance, and you'll be able to do damage with them instead of the 7.7s where you couldn't do anything. It still has the 1926V torpedoes, which are very fast but have a very short range, but the main thing is you'll actually be able to hurt the enemies instead of just looking at them and wondering why you exist. So this is really good. Big positive change. The VTB 18 is basically it, but it has access to a slightly larger superstructure and a funny 37mm bonk gun on the front of it. So that is also really good and makes things a lot easier too. It also has access to the 26V torpedoes, which have a little bit more range, but nothing too crazy. Only 3 kilometers, and once again, pretty decent speed through the water, and a HE shell on the 37mm, which is pretty cool to see. They are actually changing how damage works in Naval once again. So if you destroy a part of a vehicle and you put enough damage into it, even if you don't destroy the other parts of the vehicle, the ship will sink. So it'll have like a total amount of damage an area can take. And therefore, with a gun like this, if you can hit the same place over and over and over again, you can actually do really well, and you can just hammer time, which is pretty cool. Then you have the Aconit. This, I believe, is just a flower class. It is. You can find this in the British tree already, and there's nothing really different to it. It's quite a chunky monkey and quite hard to kill. It's a rank 2 of the French tech tree at 2.3 between the MTB96 and also the L9059, 2 other British machines which are in this tech tree. And you have a Donkey 102mm on the front. You also have 2 57s, which will do quite a lot of damage. Like you can see them back here. And then also you have a 40mm that will also do damage on top of the 20mm that will be right here. This one actually has a lot more cover for against like anti-air stuff, whereas the IO class, which comes before it, doesn't or isn't able to cover itself. So I generally prefer this vehicle. I think it's a lot more fun than the IO class, and also with this additional survivability, it generally feels pretty cool. And then you have the last one, which is the Marne. This looks like a transport ship with guns on it. You'll actually find it after the L9059. It's part of the Marne class. and it has access to 4 100mm guns and then also 2 65s, which is just really weird. So you have the kind of weird 65s with the hundreds on the side, and then you have 100 on the front, one on the back, and then you have this really long ship which has access to a bunch of ammo and fuel. Very surprised this is in the coastal tech tree. It makes much more sense being in the blue water tech tree, but I suppose they want to kind of fan out the coastal tech tree, which makes, a lot of sense. These guns are very old. They actually have quite good penetration and not a great amount of damage behind them, but depending on their characteristics when they come out, could actually be incredibly fun. And hopefully this thing actually gets a proper spawn. If it gets a destroyer spawn, it's going to be pretty worthless. But if it gets kind of like a middling spawn, if they ever decide to add like a frigate spawn or something, this one could work pretty well as a way to just donk PT boats. So that is all of the naval vehicles that are coming in the next major update. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.